Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University. Welcome to Outrider 20, The Mattering of Sinead O'Connor. Those of you that have joined us on our Outrider journey might remember right at the start we talked about, yes, we're going to explore the nature of the PhD, how to work with supervisors, how to develop alternative income streams, methodologies, ontologies, yes. But right at the start it was clear we were going to pause every now and again and investigate a significant person that's inspirational, aspirational, and perhaps also provides a warning. As you may remember, the first Outriders existed. The first finding of the word Outrider was from the 1530s, where it referred to a person who accompanied a significant object or a significant person. They would protect, but they would also provide information and help those in power predict the future. The Outrider exists to provide an opening, to provide information as a forerunner, but also as a warning. So through our century, new definitions of the Outrider arrived. The Outrider is someone who is outside of the main group, who decides to not follow the trends. And we'll talk about a lot of these cultural figures, perhaps every 10 or 20 Outriders. And it seems appropriate, I think, that our first Outrider that we talk about in Outrider 20 is Sinead O'Connor. I've been gathering a lot of information since her death, and I wanted to focus this discussion on the idea of mattering and the idea of meaning, and why mattering and meaning are so important to our lives, to our research, and understanding our role in the development of knowledge. You see, history rarely captures the voices and the views of the lonely, those in despair. And this means that all of us who live in despair live as one data point and are unable or unwilling to share that story of despair with others. So Sinead O'Connor was an outrider to enable our discussion today of the lonely, the lost, the confused, the sad. And I also want to acknowledge a really strong book and a really strong book series for your consideration. The book was called Why Sinead O'Connor Matters, written by Alison McCabe. It was published in 2023, that is earlier this year, before Sinead O'Connor's death. And I also wanted to acknowledge the remarkable University of Texas Press that produced this great series, great university press, and they decided to take particular popular music figures and explain why they matter. What a great project. So, of course, it included the legendary Ramones, Marianne Faithfull, Karen Carpenter, and LaBelle, just to name a few. The series is ongoing. And this is a really innovative book series, and for me, it embodies the best of what a university press can do. And, I have enormous respect for a series of great university presses around the world that make a decision to do this difficult work. So well done, fantastic book series. And certainly one of the toughest areas of cultural studies, politically, methodologically, but also theoretically, is to probe the relationship between popular culture and unpopular culture. Sinead O'Connor had two moments of intense popular culture. The first moment involved, of course, the song and the video for Nothing Compares to You, her version of the Prince track. And I've often been drawn to singers who have a tear in their throat. Judy Garland, obviously, Dusty Springfield, also probably the late great, respect, Kenny Rogers. Yeah. So Sinead O'Connor was able to deliver a once-in-a-lifetime vocal and a once-in-a-lifetime performance in the video for Nothing Compares to You, and it changed the way in which music videos were made. So that was her first popular cultural moment. Her second popular cultural moment occurred when she ripped up a photograph of the Pope on Saturday Night Live. Now, her life would bounce between these two moments until her death, bouncing between popular and unpopular culture. And she's remembered for these two popular cultural moments, but she lived much of the rest of her professional life in unpopular culture, producing outstanding music that just didn't fit into the parameters of popular music at that particular time. She also had to manage what other defiant women have to manage, and that's the label of being mad or crazy. And when I was 19, I read the great book by the Australian historian Professor Jill Julius Matthews, and that book was titled Good and Mad Women. What a book it was and is. I recommend it to you. And Matthews mapped Australian history in the 20th century through the journey to become a woman. And she used as her data, as her knowledge set, 60 case notes on 60 women that were treated at Glenside Hospital in South Australia. So Matthews, through these case notes, demonstrated the versions of femininity that were available and shows how a woman is defined as either good or mad. These tropes, good and mad, popular culture and unpopular culture, would define Sinead O'Connor's life, professionally and personally. And she moved through all sorts of identity labels: married, divorced, lesbian, not lesbian, Catholicism, Islam, and of course her reversion to Islam and the summoning of her new name, Shuddaka Sadat, is part of this story as well. This narrative is not predictable. It's filled with anger and pain and loss and despair. Deep, deep despair. Deep, deep loneliness. She remains an outrider for all of us who have lost, for all of us who have suffered, for all of us who just don't know if we can manage another day. But she was a fighter, and you know what? She was right a lot of the time. The Catholic Church was covering up child abuse, full stop. There is profound racism in the music industry, and the definition of what is popular in the music industry, what is success in the music industry, excludes an array of people and an array of voices. She was right. Now, she was famous in the late 80s, early 1990s in a way that it's very difficult to be famous now. And from that peak moment of fame, she danced with unpopular culture through the remainder of her life. And she, after things happened, she continually left the music industry only to return once more, release music and tour. And as McCabe has stated, we need to understand why Sinead O'Connor matters beyond, quote, the crazy bald-headed woman who ripped up a picture of the Pope, end of quote, and beyond the, quote, talented artist who was cancelled for calling attention to something terrible that we all now know to be true, end of quote. Wow. So these mattering narratives are important, but they're just not enough, because they're important to us as scholars. We need to learn from this as researchers. We need to learn that it's important that we do not walk away from the difficult. We do not walk away from the uncomfortable. We don't put labels on events and people, and we don't put assumptions. Oh, yeah. We don't put assumptions on events and on people. We as scholars, we as researchers have to work a lot harder than that. And we have a responsibility to hear and see and know the lonely, the lost, the frightened, those in despair. Now, O'Connor was born in 1966, one of 4 children, and the family's a remarkable one. Joseph is a prize-winning novelist, Emma is an art historian, John is a psychotherapist, and Sinead was the 3rd of 4 children. And from this family, it was recognised pretty early that she was creative, she had a voice, and she had a vision. And she fought with femininity in that family, embodied most effectively perhaps by shaving her head, which is both frightening but also demonstrates the vulnerability of femininity as well. Through her popular period in that late 80s, early 1990s, she was described as the Irish Bob Dylan and the Irish John Lennon. But I think what her life has proven is there can never be a female John Lennon. There can never be a female Bob Dylan. She was not sexy like Madonna, who of course also had incredibly controversial views about the Roman Catholic Church. And she wasn't eccentric like Cyndi Lauper. And Cyndi Lauper and Madonna, as they have aged, have been able to craft out particular niches in the music industry for themselves. And of course, U2 and Enya offered a much more palatable version of Irishness for popular culture, remembering that Sunday Bloody Sunday was recorded decades ago. But through it all, her first album from 1987, The Lion and the Cobra, had international success, and her most famous album, I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got, contained that song, Nothing Compares to You. So through success, but also through failure, she wouldn't be silenced. Child abuse, human rights, women's rights, religion. She was courageous and she spoke out time and time again. But of course, women are not meant to speak out. Women are not meant to speak. She walked through the Sinead is crazy storyline and the abuse. For example, Frank Sinatra described her as a, quote, stupid broad, end of quote. Good on you, Frank. And look, she kept on ending her career, right? So something terrible would happen and she'd go, I'm out. So, you know, when she was on Saturday Night Live, she retired from the music industry straight after. Then when she was on Oprah Winfrey, then when she was on Dr. Phil. She, after terrible things happened, she just wanted to get away and then she returned. And look, from the standpoint of 2023, we realise what we've all done, I think, when we've created these good and mad women in the music industry. Whitney Houston, Miley Cyrus, Britney Spears, and yes, Sinead O'Connor. And think about how rarely women, other women, supported these women when they were going through trials and problems. In fact, Madonna just added to the pile on Sinead O'Connor. Didn't defend her, made it worse. But who did defend her? Well, the legendary Chris Christopherson defended her through her adult life right to her death. And I think, I'm a big fan by the way, Chris Christopherson was always courageous and he always walked with the defiant ones. He always walked with the different ones. Yes, his long-term relationship with Bob Dylan, but also I think we need to remember Johnny Cash and the great song that Chris Christopherson wrote for Cash, Sunday Morning Coming Down. I put that in my top 5 songs in popular music of all time. Some hard living and some hard thinking went into that song. That is high popular culture for difficult times. And of course, Chris Christopherson understood Sinead O'Connor and defended her through her entire adult life to her death. But instead, of course, of that type of support, Sinead O'Connor had all these headlines that accompanied her through her life, like Neil McCormick's famous heading, quote, "The crazy lady in Pop's attic." That was his headline. Through her 2021 memoir, Rememberings, which I recommend to you, she was able to answer back, and she described in a fair amount of detail the beatings that she received from her mother, but also the consequences of being placed at 15 in Magdalene Asylum for 18 months. Yes, at 15, she was placed in an asylum. She described her life, particularly her family life, as, quote, "an agony," end of quote. But success started to emerge. The single Mandika from The Lion and the Cobra really intensified her profile. Great track, fantastic track. I recommend it to you. The challenge, though, with success like this so early in one's life is one has to learn how to manage it. We forget, I think, that her second album contained the Song of the Year, when Songs of the Year really mattered. So as a young woman, she had to find strategies to understand her abuse and her trauma, and she had to do that in public. And that, of course, is what created that second popular cultural peak on Saturday Night Live when she ripped up the picture of the Pope. And something I discovered in my research for this Outrider that I didn't know after all these years is that picture of the Pope that she ripped up was the one that was on her then late mother's bedroom wall. Ooh, gives you chills, doesn't it? So what's often forgotten, I think, through this controversy is her remarkable body of work. And when I was preparing for this Outrider, I listened to all 10 of her albums in order. It was a wonderful experience, by the way. I'm on my own. Jamie's not with me here, so I was taking one album a night. I would lay down in bed and I would listen to the album in order, and then the following night listen to the next album. So it was a remarkable, powerful experience. And I would recommend to you, listen to the albums in order. And you see so powerfully the relationship between popular and unpopular culture. And then, of course, there's all the personal matters, the 4 marriages, the 4 children, but also the personal tragedies would continue. Her son, Shane, died in January 2022. He was 17. And the album she was working on at the time, No Veteran Dies, was postponed. It is supposedly complete, except for one song. So I do hope, and I believe it probably will be, released posthumously. And like all posthumous work, it deserves reflection and consideration and respect. I also wanted to log a song that she released in February 2023. And that's where I was going, I actually listened to this before her death going, this is such a great song. It's one of my favourite songs anyway. It's the Skyboat song, the great Gaelic standard. And her version is a truly beautiful version. So it's very easy, I think, when someone dies to clean up the life narrative, to make it simple, to wipe away the edges and the smudges and the complexity. And indeed, we have seen some of that with Sinead O'Connor. Indeed, Morrissey, who is no stranger to unpopular culture himself, stated, quote, "You praise her now because it is too late. You hadn't the guts to support her when she was alive and when she needed you." End of quote. Morrissey is right. And trust me, I didn't think those words would come out of my mouth again. But Sinead died on July 26, 2023 at 56 years of age. Although the cause of death has never been stated, the Metropolitan Police confirmed that her death has not been treated as suspicious. Through her adult life, she talked about suicide. She talked about it on the Oprah Winfrey Show in 2007. And of course, there was also that incredibly uncomfortable Dr. Phil episode in 2017, where she reported 8 suicide attempts. And after her son Shane's death, she expressed her desire to die through a series of tweets. Perhaps the saddest one read, quote, "I've decided to follow my son. There's no point living without him. Everything I touch, I ruin. I only stayed for him, and now he is gone." End of quote. Sinead O'Connor admitted herself to hospital 1 hour after she sent that tweet. We must not look away from this tragedy, this horror, this sadness. We mustn't look away from this sickness and this loneliness and this despair. Sinead O'Connor matters, but it's the meaning that she's given our life that is perhaps worth the most attention. Because delicate people tear and brittle people break. One of the most moving articles on O'Connor that I read for this Outrider was from Hannah Jane Parkinson. And she stated, quote, "Forget Instagram influencers. Sinead O'Connor showed mental illness as it really is." End of quote. She dragged unpopular culture into popular culture. She didn't hide. She didn't mask. She said the unsayable. And she also, in many ways, lived with the unlivable. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and through all these diagnoses, she was put on these trial and error medications. So, of course, she lashed out in public. She expressed rage and chaos and heartbreak. Sinead O'Connor's narrative does not render mental illness safe. This is not part of a triumph over adversity story. Instead, she expressed distress. And the online environment responded to that distress with disgust and memes of ridicule. This is who we are. And this is the mirror that Sinead O'Connor has left for us. A person who's given so much joy and love and passion to our lives walked alone, walked in despair, and we described her as the mad woman in Pop's attic, and we laughed. Sinead O'Connor was an outrider, and an important one. She's cleared a pathway for us to make a decision today and make a decision tomorrow. How will we care for those in pain, those frightened, those in despair, those who are lonely? How will we manage the discomfort when someone says the unsayable or behaves in a way that's just not really fitting in with our normative parameters? How about all of us today? Let's make a decision to say hi to somebody on the street. Have a conversation, have a chat, not run to the next Teams meeting, but stop and pause and look in somebody's eyes and care. That matters. Through Sinead O'Connor's life and death, today we have an opportunity to make a different decision. To care, to respect, to listen, and to learn. We can make a decision not to ridicule, to label, to judge, and to laugh. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.